We are here today with Darian Smith, whose books look quite fascinating because the description for the first one involved murder. Just your average murder. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on at the moment, and then we'll get into your other works.
Cool. Just a little bit of light murder. So I'm a writer who's based in New Zealand. You might tell from a little bit of an accent. What I'm currently working on is the third book in this series, which is the Agents of Calanon series. So yet more murders to deal with, and magic and mayhem.
Murder, magic, and mayhem.
Oh,
so
yes.
Inspiration and entertainment. Hooray.
It's lots of fun.
Oh, yeah. Always entertaining. Okay, so I guess we should probably start with book 1 then, because if you're working on book 3, we'll have no idea what's going on.
There's that.
So tell us a little bit about book 1, and then we'll get into everything else.
Cool. Book 1 is... I describe them as being kind of like CSI, but with swords and magic. So it's a murder mystery, but in a fantasy world. Mm-hmm. And book 1 is where you meet the characters and that you'll see through the series. And the main character is Brennan. His country has recovered from a war, and he was pretty much a war hero. And is known for that, but he's feeling a bit guilty about some of the things that he had to do during that time. So he's retrained as a physician, and is trying to balance the cosmic scales, I guess.
Yeah.
And then suddenly there's this murder that happens in the royal family, and it looks like it involves dark magic, and all sorts of things are happening. And there's a high likelihood that if this doesn't get solved, it's going to get blamed on the country that they were at war with, and potentially we have a whole nother war. And that's the last thing that Brennan wants. So his job is to figure out who done it.
Yeah. That would be useful.
Yeah. The classic whodunit, but with magic. So.
Ooh, okay. So how do you combine CSI type whodunits with magic?
I love magic. I love reading fantasy and writing fantasy. So that part, I think, kind of came naturally to me. But I have taken in many ways that police procedural kind of murder mystery format to it. So even in the prologue, sorry, spoiler, how in most murder mystery TV shows, you'll have that teaser scene at the start where you see a character and they either find a dead body or they become a dead body. That's my prologue. That kind of structural stuff of the classic murder mystery is there, and the twists and turns and things. But I also, because it's a fantasy world, I wanted there to be magic, so the magic is part of the mystery, and the kind of investigative team, if you will, is made up of experts in different types of magic as well.
Aha.
So you have a mage who joins the team, and a particular Jinn shaman who specializes in raising the dead and that sort of stuff. So yeah, we have that
raising the
mix
dead.
of things. Yeah, she has a particular skill. Her people kind of raise the dead and make good use of them. So when you first meet her, she is using essentially a zombie for beekeeping purposes, because who cares if a zombie gets stung by bees collecting honey, right? So
yeah, that's one use for a zombie.
Yeah, they're very practical people.
I would assume, though, that the dead people's memories don't actually exist after they've been raised, because otherwise there'd be no mystery.
Yes. So the people who are raised are not really themselves, put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a catch to that particular form of magic.
There always is.
Yeah.
Fun. Okay. I should probably ask about book 2 and 3, but I'm not sure how to without spoiling the mystery. one assumes that it has been solved, and yet more problems ensue from that.
Yeah, so essentially each book is its own mystery or a couple of mysteries, and they solve it by the end, because I think the whodunit requires that. I would hate to leave people hanging. But there is an overarching story through the series as well, and you will get to see those characters and the impacts of what they've been through carry over into the next books. And each book will reveal a little bit more about the characters that you get to know. And I tend to what I'm doing is kind of putting a different character on the cover of each book, and that kind of gives you a hint as to whose background you're going to get mainly focused on for that particular book.
Okay.
So, and yeah, you'll get a bit of the history and some of the secrets of certain characters in each book.
Fun.
Yeah.
Wow,
They're a motley bunch.
Yeah, so many questions, but mysteries are always hard because spoilers.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so you've got those three. The third one is in progress. Where are you?
It is. I'm not as far along as I would like to be. I've been promising this third book for far too long, but it is getting close to being ready. So I'm looking at having that out hopefully pretty soon this year.
Oh, hooray!
Yeah,
and then
it will be a big hooray for me. I'm going to be so glad to have it finished at last.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, dead people, they do rather weigh on you.
They do. They do. Yeah.
And then what? Are you gonna keep going with this series, or do you have other plans?
A little of both. So my current overarching storyline and thoughts around it are that there's probably 6 books in this series. It does have the potential, I suppose, to go further if people are really liking it, and I'm still really liking it, because you can always kill people in new and interesting ways. But I also have some other ideas for other books and other series that I would like to work on as well. So
same universe or different entirely?
Different entirely. Yeah, so I've got one in mind that is more of a I guess almost a young adult kind of thing set here in New Zealand.
Okay.
So kind of riffing on some of our local legends.
Local legends are always entertaining.
Yeah, it's something a bit different. And I guess, for people here, it's a bit kind of old hat, but for the rest of the world, they may not have heard of those stories. And of course, I'll be putting my own spins and twists on things.
Oh, well, naturally, because that's kind of the whole point of causing trouble.
Exactly. That's the fun of being a writer, is taking inspiration from here, there, and everywhere, and kind of making it your own.
Yeah. Ooh, that would be fun. Sort of a, yeah. Ooh, that's exciting. I love gathering all the legends from around the world and seeing what's different and what's not. Okay, so I looked at your website, and there's rather a lot more on there than just your 3 books that you talked about. One of them looks like to be an anthology, or is it just your short stories?
Shifting Worlds is short stories by me. I've contributed to some other anthologies before, but I went for quite a while writing a lot of short stories. There was a phase here in New Zealand. It doesn't seem to be happening as much now, where there were a lot of short story competitions. So I entered a lot of those and was fortunate enough to win some prizes there, which was quite fun. I ended up with a whole stack of these short stories, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to put them together in a book. I've done that, and it's a real mix of, there's some literary fiction in there, there's a lot of fantasy, there's some sci-fi, there's a superhero in an insane asylum, there's drag queens fighting zombies, there's all sorts of wacky things. And then I've also added a little bit behind each story as to kind of what inspired me and why I wrote that story, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, Oh, well, short stories are always entertaining because you can explore a lot in a very small space.
Yes.
Very.
And I think they get a they get a bad rep.
Mhm.
And I think for me at least, short stories growing up, they were the ones that I got made to read at high school, and
Yeah.
I didn't much like them. And it wasn't until later that I realized that they can actually be really enjoyable. And, in this fast paced world, sometimes just a little bite sized story that gives you a payoff in a short amount of time is quite good.
hmm I mean, a lot of the stories that we were made to read in school, I don't care what form they weren't, I think, representative of what they could have been.
Yeah. And I think there's this expectation or well-meaning intention for us, to be made to read, very impressive literary, type things. And I know my wife has a story which she recounts um, when she was in high school, and the task for the time was to pick a genre or a book of any kind and read it and study it. And she was very excited as a fantasy lover and picked a fantasy book. And the teacher said, no, you read enough of that already. Here, read this
Oh,
very kind of highbrow literary thing that she hated.
oh,
And we're like, why? Why would you do that to a child who is actually, really enjoying reading and really excited to do something?
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think unfortunately there's this expectation that we have to force ourselves to embrace a particular style of book or a particular style of writing,
Yeah.
and that others have less value perhaps. And I don't think that's true.
No, anyone who spends hours at a time putting words onto a page, I think that counts for something. Either we're
Perhaps.
completely insane or it's like just the greatest thing ever. So
Probably both.
naturally,
Um,
all the
but
best
I
authors
also
talk.
think, yeah, I also think the messages and the things that we look for in literary fiction in an English class at school are also present in fantasy and in sci-fi and in all those other genres,
Mhm.
and
It
sometimes delivered more
also
cleverly.
happens to have magic,
Yes, magic.
which is always fun. Okay, I do want to know a little bit more about your magic system.
Ah, um, so it's kind of a mix because each of the characters that use magic tend to use it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so there's a set of mages of which you really don't see many,
Mm-hmm.
and they are kind of the old school. They've studied really hard to learn how to manipulate magic.
Uh-huh.
Um, the test, for becoming a mage essentially is that it will take you longer than one lifetime to learn it.
Ah,
So your first test is to study hard enough in the original lifetime that you have, that you figure out how to extend your life so that you can then study the rest. And unfortunately, not everybody is successful at that. So there's not that many mages, and there's not that many people willing to become mages because
yeah,
you're sacrificing your entire life for study that may or may not pay off.
that's
Um,
that's great.
yeah, so that's one kind of one um, type of magic user in the series, and then the other is more the Jin shaman
Mhm.
magic, and that's more of an elemental kind of magic, and they make deals with earth spirits, and there's this. What's the best way to describe it? I guess yeah, we're back to the zombie raising,
Yeah.
and yeah, so the earth spirits of the current world are good, I suppose you could say, or perhaps indifferent in some cases.
Mhm.
And so they deal with them and make a bargain with them for things. And then the ones, I'm giving things away a little bit now. So the ones that come from another place are the ones that they put into the bodies that they animate. And
Oh,
they're evil and they have to be dealt with in different ways. So yeah, there's a bit of a mix of magic systems, I guess, going on.
Fun. I mean, at least the earth spirits are, only indifferent or mildly interested as opposed to like malevolently interested.
Yes. And I guess as the series progresses, we're discovering that they are, I guess they have their own intentions, as everybody does.
Naturally.
Yeah.
What fun. What fun. Okay. So as far as the magic interacting with science bit, I know you said that it's a sort of police procedure style, but is there actually an interaction forensically or something of the sort?
Yeah. So there's a real mix. So I've got in the team those two magic users. We have a priest who's more of a scientist, and particularly with a specialization in poisons.
Oh.
So yeah, there's a bit of sort of the more traditional forensic investigation style of things that he brings to the team, and there's kind of that blend, kind of what's happening and how do we figure it out, and between all of them, they can get some stuff together.
I imagine you probably wouldn't want to drink the tea he offered.
You want to be a little cautious around Taryn. Yeah, he's a bit awkward, and he's a bit he's a bit of a weirdo.
Well, I mean, those are always the fun ones.
They are, yeah. People seem to quite like Taryn, which is good.
Yeah. So for your genre, sort of a, I guess, mix of mystery and fantasy, is there someone else's stories, another writer out there whose abilities you'd like to steal?
There's so many, to be honest. I think
it's always hard to choose.
It is. I mean, I like so many writers, and I would love to steal the marketing ability of many successful writers.
Yes, please. That would be very useful.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I just enjoy reading a big range of fantasy books, and I don't necessarily want to be them, because I'm enjoying their stories as their stories and my stories as my stories. But yeah, I think there's a lot of really cool ones out there. And much as stealing someone's ability sounds kind of like a nice shortcut, I've put so much work into getting to my ability.
Might as well make use of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's always fun. So as far as the story crafting process goes, do you have a least favorite part, not including marketing, because that one's just tragic for all of us?
It so is. I have discovered this part of my process that happens about halfway to 2/3 of the way through seemingly any book, where I discover that I hate the book and it's terrible and nothing I can do is making it work. And then I basically just have to keep pushing through and trusting that it's going to come out okay at the end. Yeah. And when I first had this experience, I was like, oh no, I've completely lost my mojo. This is terrible. This is the end. And then people were like, no, we really like this. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I went back and kind of read through it and went, no, actually I am happy with it. And then it happened with the next book, and I was like, oh crap, this is just what I do. Okay. So I could do without that part.
Yeah. Geez, the moment of realization where this is not terrible is always a good one, though.
That's true, yes. Getting to the other side of it and looking back and going, no, actually, I'm happy with this, is definitely a good moment.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that happens right around the middle bit.
Yeah. And apparently that's a reasonably common experience for writers, and it certainly seems to be for me. When I started out, used to think that writing would get easier the more you did it. Nah, not true.
Well, the problem is that you start to understand more of what goes into the craft, so you're actively thinking about things instead of actually getting lost in the story, or at least that's my experience.
I think that's probably true. Yeah. The other part that I do find a little bit difficult is kind of the relationships, romancy kind of thing. I wrote a book that is more paranormal romance, urban fantasy kind of stuff. And I must admit, I did struggle with building the relationship between the two characters in that, as in the writing of it. And I'm very fortunate in that my wife is a romance writer, so I could go and talk to her about it.
Yeah, it's a whole separate way of interacting with the characters.
Oh, very much so. And I have enormous respect for anyone who can do romance writing well. So yeah, it's something that I think is part of any book, in all honesty, because it's part of human interaction. But if you've got a book where that's a big part of the focus, that's an extra challenge. Whereas I would much rather just, and as I complained on numerous occasions, can't I just blow stuff up and have them deal with that?
You could, but the after image might not be quite what you expect.
Yeah, it does change the nature of the book a wee bit.
Although, for a superhero in an insane asylum, like you were talking about, that one probably is accurate.
Yeah. True. Yeah, I think there may have been an explosion in that story.
Always entertaining. Okay. So, why a paranormal type thing? That's rather different from your other stuff.
Yeah, it was just a story that had been in my mind for a really long time.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, so it's another one that's set in New Zealand and kind of pulls on some of the local mythology, and also some more kind of Irish mythology. And it's a story that focuses on a character who is escaping from an abusive relationship, and she basically runs away up north to a really rural part of the country, to her old family home that's essentially derelict, and has been there since her family first migrated to New Zealand way back when New Zealand was first being colonized or invaded, depending on how you you view it at the time. And so we get her kind of story in the current timeline, where she's figuring out that her family has a lot more history and secrets, and the house is haunted, and there's some weird stuff going on, and there's a little bit about her ancestor and what happened there. And she's developing a relationship with the hot neighbor guy at the same time, which as
all sorts of impending trouble. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so a bit of history involved too.
Yeah, a little bit. And I've created a fictional town and a fictional iwi is one of the words that we use here, which is kind of I guess translates as being like a tribe of so Maori, the indigenous people. So I created a fictional iwi for her to interact with, because I didn't want to step on toes, because of course I'm messing with history. It's a fantasy novel. There's magic and ghosts and stuff. So yeah, it draws on some local stuff, but is not, I guess, accurate in that way entirely.
Sure. How interesting, though. I love messing with history.
Yeah.
Oh, always entertaining.
Definitely.
Okay, so for writery types trying to get into your area, and I think I'm going to go with the local legends bit as opposed to the fantasy mystery. Are there traps to avoid? Because you mentioned, stepping on toes, but I imagine it's probably more than that.
Yeah, I think there definitely are. And it's a tricky one. And there's a lot of, questions these days in particular about, is that your story to tell and that kind of thing. And I do think, we have to be respectful, especially if we're borrowing inspiration from local legends and things like that. I think it's a pity to stay clear of that stuff for fear of stepping on toes, because then we lose a lot of really cool stuff. But it is, something I think to be aware of. It's one of those things. Anytime we write something that is other than what we personally are,
Right.
we have to do that respectfully, and I think that works for a man writing female characters, or a woman writing male characters, or a white person writing characters of other ethnicities than themselves, or vice versa. And we can't just write what we know. That old maxim of write what you know. That makes for a really boring story, because all the characters are the same.
What about writing fantasy at that point?
Exactly. So I think there are definitely pitfalls, and you want to be conscious and respectful. I think is all you can do. And there's value in talking to people who know more than you do.
So for me, most of the world.
Well, it depends which parts you want to access, I guess, for inspiration.
That's true. So for then the fantasy mystery bit, things that are pitfalls potentially.
The mystery side of it, definitely making sure that I know where everyone is and where all the clues go and the red herrings and all of that sort of stuff. So people often say, are you a planner or a pantser? And I definitely plan, because I feel like with this genre I have to. I like to know where I'm going anyway. But especially for something like this, I need to know who did what, where, and when, and how, and where I'm going to drop this clue and what it's going to mean for the next little bit of the story. So,
it's always useful when the murderer doesn't jump out at you at the last minute.
Yeah. Surprise! It's this guy, and you're like, "Who's he? What?"
I was mentioned on page 28.
Yeah, I was the guy they bought a donut from and didn't say a word.
I've read
so
like that.
That's, I think, the biggest pitfall of that is that you want to have whoever it is that's behind this be part of the cast, be part of all of it, but not to be obvious,
right?
But also to make sense at the end. So there's a real balancing act that has to happen there.
Absolutely. Okay, you want them not to be obvious, but have to make sense.
Yeah.
That one's tough.
I know, I don't make my life easy, do I?
Jeez. No. But then what writer does?
True.
Yeah. Okay. I do want to know a little bit more about the world that you've got your novel set in. You said there was a war.
Yes. So before the story kicks off, we're talking, I think it's 7 years or a decade or something before that. These two countries have been at war for a really long time. And essentially the other guys were winning. And unfortunately, that's devastated a big part of this country, and so they've spent a long time trying to recover from that. They did manage to fight them off in the end, because there's a massive river running through the middle of the country, and they manage to dam it and trick the other guys into trying to cross where they thought was safe to cross, and then release the dam.
Ooh, oops.
Yeah. So that was a bit harsh. So that's not terribly spoilery. That's just part of the history of the world. But yeah, so both countries essentially have been devastated by the after effects of this war, and so all of the characters have that in their backgrounds. There's something. There's a question of what were they doing during that time? How have they developed since? How is it affecting them? And I wanted to have all of that be there, and not necessarily the main focus of the story, but be to sit there,
right,
in each of those characters. Like, how's that affected them, and what are they doing now?
Right. Well, I imagine it's rather important if you're trying to understand them at all.
Yeah. And I have a counseling family therapy background, so for me, I was like, if I'm going to have characters, I'm going to have characters that have some dark and twisty, angsty pasts and interestingness to them. Yeah, it's part of what.
Always fun.
Yeah.
I mean, not for them, but
no, not so much for them.
For the readers, we tend to enjoy the problematic pasts.
Exactly. Yeah, I often joke that I've perverted my education, because as a counselor, my role is to help resolve conflict and help people to communicate and work through their issues. And as a writer, I'm using all of that same knowledge and theory to mess them up and create conflict.
You're just applying it in a roundabout manner, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just coming at it from a different angle and a different direction.
It makes you have more interesting characters.
I hope so.
Oh, your books are going to be trouble. I can tell.
I hope so.
Always entertaining. Yeah. Ooh. Well, it has been super fun talking with you. I hope I didn't get you up too early for this interview.
Thank you. No, that's fine. I did swallow as much caffeine as I could hold just before we contacted each other, so it seems to be kicking in, so that's good.
Always good. Is there anything else you'd like to add, writing related or not writing related, completely tangential or not?
I might actually do a little plug for any writers that are listening themselves, since I did mention that I use my psychology counseling background for building characters and creating conflict. I have a book specifically about that, so if anyone's interested in how I do that, it is called the Psychology Workbook for Writers. And yeah, essentially, I started doing a lot of talks to writer groups on how I was using that knowledge and perverting my education. And they kind of said to me, well, why do you not have this written down somewhere for us? So essentially, yeah, I wrote a short little book that is really concise and gets to the point, because I think a lot of craft books kind of waffle a wee bit. And it just kind of... yeah, just a tad. So this one gives a really concise description of some of the theories and some examples and kind of some worksheets on how to use it. So if that's useful for people. Very
useful. I shall have to look into that.
Cool. That's me, really.
Okay, sounds fantastic.
And thank you so much for having me and asking me some interesting questions. It's always fun to get asked about writing and have to kind of think about it and answer things and go, oh yeah, what do I do?
Yeah, I like causing as much trouble as I possibly can.
Nice.
Best way to go about this.
Absolutely.